Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Are we live? Yes, we are. Welcome to tonight's episode. I've had a heavy day today, but hopefully I can get this talk out. Okay. Flawed designs and flawless intelligence. What can be said about it? I mean, I've kind of in every talk I've given tried to bring an awareness that speech starts off the world in a dualistic position. That means when you speak about something, you're in some sense strangely, it's kind of like you're creating, just like how an object is in an objective world, you're creating a subject in a subjective world. I find that something changed in the way that I was experiencing language. That language was something where it was structures I was repeating, regurgitating, you can say. It's as if my certainty had to do with the design. It's as if the design of the communication was defining the certainty. But after some point, my relationship with language changed. It's as if I wasn't thinking in words anymore. It was as if there was a movie occurring behind my eyes, and as I looked at that movie, I extracted. It's kind of like, imagine like different colors of petals, just the petals. Like imagine a river, like a stream, a gentle stream, and the whole surface of the stream is covered with different colored petals. Now imagine as these petals are gently moving by or at various speeds, I pick some of these petals and kind of like put them under the magnifying glass. So what I'm saying is that I allow there to be a sort of inner movement, and then I wonder about the external movement. But most people need to have an external movement to be able to be aware of the inner movement. This is why we had a sort of ceremonial state of mindset in our history. The Buddha, he was born at a time where before him was Brahmanism. In some sense, there was a lot of ritualistic ceremonial behavior. Buddha looked at this ritualistic kind of approach to truth, and it's kind of very interesting. I tell people that we went from idol worship to ideal worship, but I'm summarizing. After objective, we were worshiping objects. We started worshiping changing objects, and then we came to the subject, which was different from the object. So that means if you can't put your mind on the table, then in some sense the objective becomes questioned. To be honest, the title came to me, Flawed Designs and Flawless Intelligence. And I was deciding whether I should put it flawed designs in flawless intelligence, but I didn't want to create a sort of dichotomy. I didn't want to, anytime something's dualistic, you can choose two ways up the mountain. You know, either from order you go to chaos or from chaos to go to order. That means the moment I speak, all conceptual reality, all thought that is in a sort of dualistic context, it can have two different movements. You know, either known is moving towards the unknown or the unknown is moving the known. You know, known is moving the unknown or the unknown is moving the known. This is as far as our psychologies require duality. So language is a dualistic technology. I am saying this. This is why I realize I'm not a thought. I'm aware of thoughts. And that awareness cannot be a thought. It's not, it's like a thought cannot think it's a thought. It's like void, conceptually void. You know what I mean? What I mean is, right now, imagine I say who's speaking to you is a thought. Let's just assume I'm a thought right now. Okay? Now, this thought has to rethink itself into different action. And if it rethinks itself into different action, it cannot be the same thought. So you are never, you can say you are traveling through thoughts, but you cannot say you're a thought. You can say you're journeying through belief systems, but you cannot say you believe in one thing. You know, it's kind of like me taking a photo of the world and thinking that photo is the world. That's what beliefs can become. You know, a belief, as Chung Tzu says, is like a leaf on a tree. Thoughts change by the seasons. And so there's two ways your thoughts can change, believe it or not. One is the free will moves it. The other is the external reality's will, the divine will moves it. So what that means is the person either thinks that they're going to get up from the chair, or something comes and pushes them off the chair. Believe it or not, guys, today I had the most unique vision. Like, you don't understand how important this talk is for me to say, because I saw something that it's kind of like I've been, since the middle of the day when I noticed it, I've been kind of waiting to come and share it. And it's this strange concept. You see, it's like I tend to speak about things that can be embraced in pleasant context to some degree. But this is something that I don't know what emotion the listener will have by hearing it, but I'll share it. I ask myself, it's as if we are born in a world where the dreams of both the good and the bad can come true. And it's as if we are designed to be animals. It's as if the purpose of our body is to continue its design, but the purpose of the mind is to move beyond its design. And so I was like, what is this? We open our eyes as temporary creatures in a vast space. And the whole value of our temporality is what we can accumulate or achieve in the future. I feel the civilization, strangely, has never been this advanced and this inefficient. I find that in anything you do in life, there is a natural way and there is an unnatural way. Something becomes unnatural if an external reality is directing you. Something becomes natural when you abide by your inner reality. The inner reality, I have to say within and without. I have to say external and internal. But to be honest, it even moves beyond the dualism. Where are we left? The world that turns in our eyes can change by us, but the world that is in front of our eyes changes us. What that means is just like how death is unavoidable, what will happen to you tomorrow is unavoidable. That means the continuity factor of the lifetime is unavoidable. That means you are an existential design. It doesn't matter how much esoteric or spiritual ideology you have, physicality must be acknowledged first. That means I have no idea why somebody would use the word spiritual if objective physical reality is not real to them. It's kind of like looking from the top of the mountain and from the bottom of the mountain. Both viewpoints see the mountain, but they see a different value and extent to the journey. I entertain a school of thought where I personally consider it's you can say kind of like I believe the proper word is a posteriori universe. I believe that experience was here first and then the theory. I asked myself pretty much today if my interpretation on the values of my life and the way I'm valuing my suffering could be wrong. So it's as if you ask yourself, do I know the ultimate? And instantly you will get an intuitive answer. If the answer is yes, that means in the moment you have found contentment. If the answer is no, it means that the ego is more supreme. What that means is the idea of yourself is more important than the experience you're having as a moment of being. When ideology becomes more important, life gets forgotten. Believe it or not, language is a bridge. And I've said it's a bridge between people's inner universes, inner lives, but it is also a bridge it's a bridge to the center of the moment. We are temporary creatures in an eternal process of manifestation. It is not just children being born, it is also stars. The macrocosm holds wonders beyond our thoughts. What must the species do? Not too close to the sun to burn and not far enough to freeze. The eyes of the species open to the unknown. The unknown enters people's lives. It enters people's lives like the same trust that lovers have. You see, it's as if you see the profoundness between. It's like since growing up, I've both through literature and outside of literature, I've seen powerful archetypes of lovers. You know, it's like Romeo and Juliet is just one grain of sand in the hourglass. There's many. And so what really occurs is that the relationship is that the presence of the being is so it's as if like the unknown is more beautiful than the known. So it's like you want to it's like you know how sometimes when you know something you don't want it, but when you don't know it, it's like before you know it you're searching for it, running after it until suddenly it's given to you. People have forgotten, but I believe what marriage meant, especially in ancient times, was the union of souls as one moment. It's pretty much two beings who are entering one moment of karma. We don't realize how much of our intelligence and our value depends on our relationship with the environment. And even more incredibly, our relationship with our outer environment has to do with our relationship with our inner environment. Pretty much, I find that you, dear listener, may find yourself where I'm standing, which is at the edge of conceptual value. Two things can happen. Either the communication evolves or it returns to the silence where it is stepped out of. You don't know how many thoughts I've had in this life that I've written down, and it's as if those thoughts were blessed. And some thoughts, they just entered my mind, and I wished I had a pen. You know, I wished I had a pen, and I didn't in that moment. So it was one where some thoughts you are meant to just hug and let go, you know. But some thoughts you're meant to stick to. It's as if it's a part of you have found in this endlessly changing world. Human beings will realize that if we do choose a collective efficient vision, that means 8 billion beings on a rock treat this rock as if we're all a staff of the same, we're all air hostesses and pilots of the same species. We are piloting our species. And the pilot must be aware of the space. And anytime you're not aware of the space, you see more your inner life, so you become a selfish entity. You know, and anybody who becomes selfish, I'll tell you that you're pretty much selling fish. That means every fish caught by that fisherman who was selling fish was like, this fisherman's selfish. In life, to be honest, I don't feel there is a moment of perfection. It's not a straight line. It's, believe it or not, it appears, the mind wishes, the ordered universe may be confined to a sort of kind of restricted linearity. Okay, that means just because we feel we are present in the unknown doesn't mean we have to forget about the language of mathematics, which a lot of our sciences and technologies, external technologies, depend on. Pretty much life, I consider the educational system has to just teach languages to people. You can't really teach anyone anything. You're just opening up their spectrum so they can acknowledge more patterns, I find. Right, so I don't believe in this concept. Like it's like, it's not like, what is this, like students are beggars and the teacher is throwing knowledge in their hands. Like, that's the worst educational system. It should be that, it should be in some sense a sort of integration of generations of psychology. That means I find classrooms should have people from all areas of all ages of life, you know, in the same, of course, I'm just theorizing potential parallel ways that the educational system and the classroom can exist. Because believe it or not, the classroom is the best metaphor for society. That means there's some people, and just certain personal family members of mine, where my stream of thought takes a different turn. I find most spiritual people eventually as if kind of poured into a sieve of various spiritual experiences, eventually conclude that life is a sort of spiritual school. You don't know how many times I've spoke to people, and I've asked them, like you who are using the word spirituality, what does it mean? And pretty much it seems most people feel spirituality is a sort of infinite evolution, but existential, right? So when we say it's like scientists are telling us our bodies are evolving very slowly, that we can't see it unless we fast forward through time. And at the same time, you know, it doesn't, like, you tell me why atoms should be people. It's like, why this design? You know, you don't know how many days I've waken up, or even at nights, where it's like, at first it would startle me, then I got comfortable with it, where I would just wake up and be like, whoa, I'm on a rock in the middle of nowhere. You don't know how many times. And the reason I say nowhere is the way I use the word nowhere is very different, I find, than Perhaps others. For me, nowhere is a value. It's literally sight and emptiness. Like I remember I wrote it seeing, SEEING dash emptiness, you know? So it's like you're not just seeing emptiness, you are the field's awareness of its presence. That means pretty much the pride of matter is its position. The pride of the ego is its subjective position. And its subjective position changes, either you change the world or you change yourself. And eventually you'll realize the world will change you and you will change the world too. It's a symbiosis. It's a symbiosis with the history. That's an incredible way of saying it. Imagine history, the past. How do I say it? It's a symbiosis with a story. Okay. Believe it or not, the exploration of knowledge is the edge of our universe is in one angle empty, in another angle infinite. And anytime you see the appearance, even the appearance of these phenomena, it's important. That means some people may think like you're standing between two mirrors, okay? Let's say imagine there's two mirrors facing one another, you stand between and you see an infinite optical illusion of your reflection, right? So that means the concept of parallel selves was actually introduced to me when I looked between, like I stood between two mirrors, you know? Your mind is not your mind. It is nature's presence. And man's realization that he is an extension of nature is his objective freedom. Man must return to nature. He will realize it doesn't make sense to create virtual realities and simulations of nature when the real thing is accessible. You know, I want sometimes the listeners to consider that maybe in 700 years the world will be such a technological place that, as if what do you call it, trees are in history books, and there's technology, there is artificial, as if everything in nature is an artificial simulated replication of a nature that was. Kind of like the purpose of the present is to carry the past, and the purpose of the future is to, in some sense, acknowledge the present. You know, there's a sort of divine laughter in mysticism. You can say it's when a man laughs like a god, you know? And it appears, I find, in a moment where all the relationships of this character of thought in a sort of world, whatever, you know, whatever program your world is kind of appearing through. This character in this world suddenly realizes its intelligence is not just from the setting. Its intelligence is not just from the character itself. That means it's not just the character that's intelligent. It's not just the world of the character that is intelligent. It is also the witnessing, the person playing the video game off screen. So what I'm saying is, because we're in a limited world, our definitions of self will be limited. So eventually there will be, due to the nature of dissolution, it's as if we are kind of strange. We are just, like you can say human existence is a law of nature. And let me tell you what I mean by that. It's literally how suddenly some particles join in a unique way, express in a unique way, and suddenly let go. It's as if right now as I'm speaking, all these atoms, all this stardust that is my physical body, it's as if it's an army of particles that have chosen to march together to be me. Do you see? So I'm saying that eventually the archetypes will realize they are following greater archetypes. So the greatest archetype, I don't know if Carl Jung spoke about this, but he probably should have. It's the archetype of the infinite. And it's a very dangerous, I don't want to say dangerous, but it's literally like the heavy weight in the gym, It's as heavy as trying to save the world. Anybody who tries to save the world will eventually realize they've been trying to save their mind that has been interpreting the world. After some point, life is not just based on communication, it's based on your performance. Your performance has to do with the directness of your experience. The directness of your experience is how much you can handle freedom. Did you know why a lot of people suffer? It's not because they don't have freedom. It's as if the universe it's like creates them out of freedom. You're born as a pure mind, as a pure attention on sculpted clay, Just a second, guys. I'm just fixing something. How can you define change? The divine laughter will come when the concept of a sense of self segmented in space and time suddenly realizes it's one moment. What that means is right now I'm going to tell you just here's the cool thing that I can even show this. Like imagine right now, just try to remember something from a few years ago, some incident from a few years ago. It could be anything. And now I want you to visualize while you've remembered that image. It's okay now, you've remembered that. So now visualize something in the future that could happen. Anything. Just something that could happen. Visualize it. And now you have in some sense, and acknowledge yourself how you're in this moment. And so you see, it's as if in this moment you had a memory of the past, a visualization of what the future could be, and you realize the past and future are being in the present moment. We have been taught time wrong. Time is a triangle. It's literally like, imagine a horizontal line going from oh man, the trains of thought are moving too fast. Past goes to future. Imagine a horizontal line from point the left to the right, Now I want you to imagine this is an inverted triangle, and both the left and the right are simulations of the present moment. So let me tell you what it is. Your mind is appearing multidimensional, yet knowing innately it is the presence of a moment. This is why whatever complex situation you experience in this life, whatever situation, it is still being a simple moment. That was the wisdom of in some sense, I find Zen. Zen was kind of like, you can define Zen as people who didn't want to touch the truth, but they saw it. I find that the greatest art is conception. It's a concept. A concept is more powerful than an image. A concept is the image brought to life. And so we are wavering between various states. You can say every night you sleep, it's as if you step into consciousness, step out of consciousness, step into consciousness, step out of consciousness. I've even poetically said that when you know how like like a person blinks, when we sleep, it's as if the world of the person is blinking. Have you noticed in deep sleep you have no stress, no anxiety? Because the sages would say, after you have moved, transcended beyond the veils of thought, you will pilot beyond the veils of emptiness, and there you will see how every moment is kind of like, Terence McKenna said it in a nice way, kind of like how an octopus is a naked mind. The octopus, it's not like it doesn't just, it's not like its color is taking the reflection. It's literally the colors that change on this octopus are its mind. So its external expression is its mind. So when you see somebody in the whoever you see, the way they behave, the way they speak, you are seeing their naked mind. This is why on some level we have this strange intuitive sense of what is and what isn't. By the way, guys, I've kind of decided to start. Like I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but if at any point, due to the nature of these being kind of once in a lifetime, kind of like I give these live streams once, feel free to share thoughts if thoughts are evoked. You know, if a great idea comes to you, share it. With the world that is here, with the world that is here to receive it. You know. It's strange. Certain moments you have to serve the intelligence of your world. Literally, the intelligence is left to its altruism to lead the way. That means imagine like playfully, like you're this Buddhist person kind of contemplating the fact that this creature, this transmigrating soul has endlessly been incarnating into dualistic frameworks. You know, for a Buddhist, you might not believe it, but the concept of birth isn't. It's not like a good sign. It's like a healthy soul is not material, is not born in unconscious manifestation. You know, and this doesn't mean that there is something wrong. It just means after some point, how the world is being, the narrative of the moment is being constantly divided between chaos and order. The bird will realize it has to stop paying attention to just one side of its wings. When a bird flies, it doesn't look at its wings, it looks in front of it. So what I'm saying is the greatest way to use thought to navigate in a reality of in a space of chaos and order is to just be in the direct experience, which is the head of the bird staring at front instead of looking at its right wing or left wing, looking at a chaotic reality or an ordered reality. So it's as if after some point you don't want to buy what the world is selling. And that's when you get enlightened. Actually, to be honest, you get enlightened when you realize it's the light in your eyes that's being the moment. The fact that we can see is just fascinating. It's like, isn't it incredible? Like, there's one way of considering that. Why did the creature evolve to see? So you see, guys, it can't be evolution, can't be just be for survival. Because at some point in the foresight of this creature, it cannot see it reaches the unknown. And so that's one thing we share in common. That means right now, like I was born in 1991, and based on the known content, that means if your mind was a container the size of the edge of the sky, as far as the edge of the sky, you're wondering about its contents. So what that means is either the mind is going to take responsibility for the moment. That means you're going to feel your free will, which is a moment of novelty. You're marching on the horses of novelty. That means you're not defined by the past or the future. You're marching in the moment. You're just present as you're kind of like this alertness, not just to the wilderness of animal life, but to the wilderness of the lives of thought. You know, there's you might not believe it, but there's a forest behind your eyes. And in this forest, every tree that has kind of been raised by your conditioning, the seeds of it has been planted by your conditioning. Each tree, each concept has branched out. And eventually it's as if all these separate influences, separate moments of your life, of the person's life, they're all branching out and their branches are interweaving, and eventually they're becoming a new platform of intelligence. So what it means is, guys, it's kind of like, how can I tell you? It's like, it's literally like a sine wave. However, it's I don't know what you said. Maybe like a cosine wave and a sine wave, kind of like what am I saying? A helix pattern. Okay, you see the DNA, how it's in a helix. You know that shape of the DNA. I find that various senses of self are spiraling within one another. That means right now as I'm speaking, like I'm in this present moment, but then suddenly I remember my childhood where I was kicking a soccer ball, so I'm there in my childhood, in that memory, which is vivid to me, and then suddenly from that I wonder about what the time is, and I wonder about the future. So I realize it doesn't matter what my thoughts are, it's where my attention is that the thought is being witnessed. Do you see? So your attention is, believe it or not, the most divine thing out here in this empty space. It's like it doesn't get more cooler than that. You're a conscious being, 4 billion years of evolution. And we've realized that it's kind of like a million physical steps is like worth one mental step. What that means is it's like first you got to find an honest world to live in, or your data, or literally how life is being received by you, will have bias. When I say find an honest world to live in, that means find a moment where whatever it is in that, whatever phenomenology the moment of being has, you trust it and you accept it. This is kind of when the self being in front of your eyes meets the self behind your eyes. A sort of rendering of the whole moment is one moment. You don't understand. It's like on one level, it's like a raindrop vertically falling from the sky, and the raindrop, while it's being like while it's falling, it's shouting like, "Oh my God, why have the heavens forsaken me? Why am I falling as an individual? What's the meaning of life? I'm just a drop. I don't even see where I'm going. What's the point? What's the point? What's the point?" Suddenly, the drop hits the ocean, and in a horizontal dimension, the meaning of its life was endlessly fulfilled. So it's a dimensional shift. So you can say that when the physical body goes through a sort of dissolution and the various kind of like this city of elements begins to be demolished slowly, the city of elemental existence, the ancients saw earth, air, fire, water, and ether. As these elements begin to fade, and you know what's fascinating about ether, the fifth element, space? Space is an element. In ancient times, it was seen as an element, but nowadays it's seen as what's holding the elements. You know, that means they thought consciousness was an element on the periodic table. Do you believe that? Not like that, but you know what I mean. So it's about eventually, I think, like it's very simple. Everybody, you can't say you don't have a mind or you wouldn't be even wondering about it. Sometimes you got to test yourself to see if you're alive. You got to kind of shatter your ego once a week. And I'll be honest, there is a sacrifice that comes with it, a sort of opportunity cost. It's kind of like the writer who's been endlessly writing for nights and days eventually realizes, okay, maybe I should go get some exercise. The most important thing is that you realize nothing, the concept of nothing and the concept of everything are arising from the same attributeless stillness and silence. We are, believe it or not, waves of intelligence. You see how kind of like a wave comes and the surfer's like, oh my God, this wave. The surfer's like surfing. Similarly, human existence and just imagine, just fast forward in your mind, rewind, but then rewind back to the beginning and then fast forward, and you'll kind of see how the progress of evolution, literally the surface of the planet is filled with creatures, these creatures leave. Filled with different creatures, it leaves. Eventually, it's as if the earth is trying to say something, and every word it says is like a creature being born. It's as if human beings are the communication of the planet is the communication of the galaxy is the communication of the universal sector is, when you reach the moment where literally the only word in the English language that makes sense to you is just is, how something just is, like there's what greater truth can you find? And it's mysterious. That's the thing. That's why we need to just throughout the world, like school, every person should kind of open up a school of Athens and just gather around a bunch of people there. And people are going to be like, yo, why are we here? And you'll be like, for no ideological, we are here in the school of Athens to challenge our minds, but through a civility. That means I want gang violence one day to change into intellectual debate. That's what I want. That at some point we realize we can shift all this external karma into inner narratives, into inner programs, and then have these programs battle it out. So what I mean by that is like I kind of, I remember in like 100 talks ago or something, I said I said that there should be there should be no longer wars on the surface of the planet, or even potential for wars to be declared by countries, objective wars, but countries are given freedom to have subjective wars. And what that means is it's like we get advanced like game designers to replicate the military of each country who's fighting with one another, imagine. And so instead of the world leaders kind of like battling it out, because eventually if a war is a coin flip, did you know? War is a coin flip. That means eventually nature decides the winner. So it, in some sense, it becomes, imagine instead of armies going to war, people actually like dying. Imagine video game pixels dying. So imagine we get the exact accurate military representation of like the military power a country has, and they all put it in one video game. So imagine the world leaders just fighting and they're moving their military and all this, all, you know, the commander of chief of every, you know, government plays this video game. So what that means is we have endless years of peace and innovation and the mind's genius being allowed. You know, there's a lot of shy people just staring at existence, not realizing life has to be lived. I am too, believe it or not, a fool of what I just said. Like in my youth, how can I tell you, I saw myself before I saw the world, and that's why I felt the world couldn't see me. Humorous. So imagine like whoever wins that video game that like imagine the United Nations, it's like a gaming room. And each world leader is fighting with their military and all whatnot. You know? I'm just saying that you'd have to take you see, you cannot avoid karma, but you can change how you receive it. You know, you can't control how nature moves. You know, it's too big. We're on the shoulder of a giant, and we're saying like you know, there's no point of acting like we know. There's much more unknown phenomena than known phenomena, and even known phenomena was sparked like fire. Just something, just at some point we held a reference point so strong that we built a subjective world on it. So I can say that flawless intelligence finds itself in flawed design and eventually realizes that if it is flawless intelligence and if it can see flawed design, if you can see your problem, you are not in your problem, you're near it. If you can't see what the problem is, then you're in your inner problem, you can say. You know, eventually life is kind of like self-awareness, which means subjective distance. That means certain thoughts I know that if I pay my attention to, the thought can literally destroy me. So what I mean by that is it's kind of like how Rumi, this poet, said, your hand, literally your hand, if you make it into a pure fist and just hold it for a couple minutes, or if you stretch it out completely and hold it for a couple minutes, the muscles will kind of get fatigued. You know, so it's like your hand gets paralyzed in some way, just you know, a temporary process. But you'll see that the hand is meant to be free. That means you must you must honor chaos as much as you honor order. Because if the chaos doesn't feel it's honored, it'll go on an ego trip. That's the issue. You know, all the Zen masters are looking at all the evil people and they're like, why are you doing, like, what? The Zen masters are looking, it's like these people don't realize emptiness is everywhere. You know, it's like I had you know, imagine somebody says like, you know, this could have comedic value. Somebody says, you know, I had the greatest conversation with a Zen master, you know, but we didn't say a single thing. No, not a single sound left our mouths. It was literally just the presence of the moment. You see, the presence of nature surpasses any sort of archetype. When I say any sort of archetype, you don't understand. It surpasses your subconscious. Literally, your attention can be in a way where your subconscious is like, yes, boss, what next? You know, like, of course I'm being playful, guys. You gotta be careful when you, language is, it's like color. You know, we're not color worshippers, so we're not like, wherever your attention goes, you're extracting value from there. So you can say, believe it or not, this is an incredible finding, but I don't know how many people will acknowledge it properly. I'll give an attempt to explain it. I was looking at psychology. I oftentimes, when I walk around, I wonder what's around me, and eventually I question how the mind of people is working. And there are times where I feel kind of like I've looked at insects. When I say insects, like I was just kind of, how do I say it? Like I was just like, I was seeing like these tiny mosquitoes in a sunbeam, all of them moving. I found myself kind of like just chilling on somewhere, just lying down on the grass and just noticing like in a sunbeam, I'm seeing this pattern of all these like like really tiny, like even like barely visible kind of flies all moving. In the sunbeam, they were visible. And then I looked at their behavior, and you know what I saw? I saw they are so dependent on one another. That means it was as if one fly is going through a pattern of movement, but the other fly is reacting off that power of pattern of movement. So eventually, all the flies are doing is not they're not having direction. They're just flight. They're kind of like they. It's as if they're just energetic expression. Believe it or not. You know, it's when I say this, how would I say it? I'm not denying insects of minds. Okay, I'm just saying I'm not trying to take insect rights away. The freedom of rights for insects. I'm simply saying in that pattern, I was seeing a codependency. And it was as if like, I don't have to just trust my unconscious. I have to also trust your unconscious, because your unconscious can influence how your consciousness influences the playing ground that we're both on. It's as if like, we can't avoid it. The reason you don't throw trash on the ground, one, is because you don't need to. But the other reason is because you're on the same ship. Do you know what I mean? That means it's like, even if you throw it, your grandchildren have to pick it up. So like, why create the hassle? And of course, it's a mindset, because you can say even there, just like how a person gets rid of trash, you can get rid of certain ideology as well. It's eventually it moves. It's at first the power of attention, which the world is being generated from, is in the subject, is in the concept. Eventually it moves to the context, and believe it or not, the context of a subject, literally like where a thought is floating in, is the wavering. It's like your direct experience. Like in your direct experience is the space where the thought of space is floating in. You see what I mean? So eventually you'll see it's a codependence on various dimensional activity. And so the mind has an ability, I could infinitely categorize, just like how, imagine like there was this book I read by this man named, I forget his name, Michael Talbot, I don't know, Talbot, I just remember this as his last name, but this guy was a savant who memorized 10,000 digits of pi, and in his kind of book he was sharing something about his life where when he was young, it's like he had some math class, arithmetic class, and so he was trying to divide the space between. So what that means is, it's like, imagine you want to walk from one street light, street, light. What do you call them? From one light pole, you want to go to the other light pole. You first divide the distance in half, and you go half. Then that other distance you have like from the halfway point of that first distance that you want to get to the pole, you divide that again in half and go half of the half. Eventually you will go so half of the half where you will never reach the destination. Do you see? You will never reach that other pole as long as you're dividing and endlessly dividing the world. Do you see? It's kind of like how it's an arc of infinity. The arc of infinity, yeah. I feel that's a good way of saying it. All right, guys, I need a couple minute intermission, but the talk is still going on. I'll be back after a few minutes. So hang in there if you want to tune in, and and feel free to carry on if not. Okay, guys. Sorry about that. I'm back. I had this thought, you know, to go into a quote tunnel. And a quote tunnel is something I do in these talks where I look at one notable person in history and I go read a list of their quotes back to back to get a sense of what kind of how their intelligence generated thought in a sequence. When I look at a quote, I don't just look at the quote, I look at the design, literally what thought, in what way the being is speaking, how much they are rebelling against structure, and how much there is, in some sense, a submissiveness towards carrying the beacon of the ancestor. You know, it's like both tradition has value, and at the same time, so does the future. So let's go into a quote tunnel of Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller is an incredible human being. And he is, I can say very comfortably, he is, what's a great way I can say? He's one of the great designers of human history. There we go. So let me just find his quotes. R. Buckminster Fuller. Let me see what the R stands for. I think it's Ralph. Oh, Richard. Richard Buckminster Fuller. He's an American architect and a designer. Buckminster Fuller says, "There is nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly." Fuller says, "Integrity is the essence of everything successful." Fuller says, "Humanity is acquiring all the right technology for all the wrong reasons." He says, "We are not going to be able to operate our spaceship Earth successfully, nor for much longer, unless we see it as a whole spaceship and our fate as common. It has to be everybody or nobody." So guys, just with me, let's all slow hand clap for that quote. So interesting. Spaceship Earth. So this Buckminster Fuller is the guy who came up with this concept. Like I was reading in the Wikipedia too. So very interesting. He says we're not going to be able to operate our spaceship Earth successfully. That means we can't operate our civilization successfully for much longer unless we see it as a whole spaceship and our fate as common. So that's another way of kind of saying how there was the story of the Tower of Babylon and how all of humanity was united under one language to build this great tower that reached the heavens, and eventually when it did, the gods, in some sense, before smiting it, they in some sense decided to break man's language. They decided to separate the mind of the species. And so all these human beings united under one language, pretty much another way of saying being on the same spaceship, Earth, you know, being in the same moment of existence, you know. It has to be, he says, unless we see it as a whole spaceship and our fate is common, it has to be everybody or nobody. It's right, because the mind takes responsible existence for the whole moment. Check this out. Buckminster Fuller says, a designer is an emerging synthesis. I can't speak tonight. A designer is an emerging synthesis of artist, inventor, mechanic, objective, economist, and evolutionary strategist. Yeah, because they have no choice. I'm telling you, you have to become all of those, because eventually, kind of like Da Vinci even said, you'll realize every subjective phenomena is connected to everything else. That means, believe it or not, with one memory, you can remember all your memories in this life. With one moment, when what you it's like a dance with subjectivity. But if you want to hold on to truth, it's as if like you give the mask of thought more power than your own experiential face. Fuller says tombs are the clothes of the dead, and a grave is a plain suit, while an expensive monument is one with embroidery. Fuller says humanity, oh, I've read that one. Fuller says, how often I found where I should be going only by setting out for somewhere else. Oh, how often I found where I should be going only by setting out for somewhere else, yeah. Very interesting. That means you have to live and you don't know where you're going, but just by the effort of applying an authentic, energetic action, eventually, it's as if you honestly step into the unknown. And it's as if whether your expectations are in a solid state or in a liquid state or a gas state, the unknown speaks. And when the unknown speaks, it's so beautiful, divinely beautiful, that it's as if your whole soul, as if every thought in your mind is a weapon in your hand, your soul drops all the weapons and just sits still and silent with its palm on its forehead, realizing that the eyes of man are the whole moment. It is now time for the advanced communicators and the pilots of consciousness of our era to return to the exploration of the unknown. Sometimes you can say, when you can't accept yourself, at least your mind can accept others. So it tries to be like others. But when you can accept yourself, that's kind of like you looking in the mirror and being like, this is what existence did. You know, you kind of like, you go with this sense of honor. You pretty much, I'm telling you, when you look at your own face in the mirror, you better see a samurai. You know, look at your past as if you're a samurai. You know, that's the healthiest thing to do, guys. You know? Let's return to Buckminster Fuller's wisdom. He says, great nations are simply the operating fronts of behind the scenes, vastly ambitious individuals who had become so effectively powerful because of their ability to remain invisible while operating behind the national scenery. Oh man, by Fuller saying this, I kind of feel he's caught in a game. Because how can you blame nature? Of course, the structure of civilization has adopted to certain patterns, whether they are inspired by truthful beings or, you know, dishonest beings. But it's eventually, whatever design is here, it's as if on some level you have come here to experience yourself as a being. That's like a purpose, just existing and experiencing. And the other is in some sense where this experience leads. Because if you live well, your life gets momentum. Now, what is this momentum? This momentum is literally a sort of unique liberation where the person is seeking their objective desires at the speed of light. It's so quick how fast they're trying to reach for their desire that the mind has to make the moment into the future, the idea of the future, the vision of the future into reality, so it just ends up in reality. So it's as if they asked energy what the purpose of life is, and it just laughed. You know, energy had nothing to say. Let's continue. In every quote of Fuller, in just pretty much language in general, you can see geometrical relationships. You don't know how much even, I forget the word for it, but like typography is very important. Not just typography, I forget the word, but literally, like, you know, in the English language, you know, it's like left to right. For example, in Japanese, it's from top to bottom, the language. And I find top to bottom much more evolved. Let me tell you why. Because the attention can really quickly, the eyes, think of it this way. The eyes of people reading in Western civilization is moving left to right, left to right, left to right. The eyes of people in, for example, Eastern tradition, in Japan is going from, imagine, top to bottom, top to bottom. So this definitely has to have a psychological influence over time. Do you know? So my mind kind of like, I've written a lot of these kind of poetic works, these poetry books, but they're kind of mystical. And you can say it's kind of like my attempts of putting various states of my mind on paper, you know. So what it is instead of going from left to right, I would just press enter. So I would write something, write a sentence, and literally like in the middle of it, press enter, press enter, press enter, in certain moments that I felt like literally. And eventually I would put all this kind of divided line in the center alignment. And how would I say it? It's like, it's very strange. It's kind of like, it's an infusion of, yeah, the eyes are not just moving left and right, they're also moving up and down. So it's it's both hemispheres of the brain are active, you can say. Fuller says the end move in politics is always to pick up a gun. I think this guy also loved movies, you know? Fuller says, sometimes I think we're alone. Sometimes I think we're not. In either case, the thought is staggering. Wow. He says, here is God's purpose. For God, to me, it seems, is a verb, not a noun, proper or improper. And that's exactly it. It's like we should slow hand clap again for this quote, guys. It's a verb. I'm telling you, true intelligence is a verb. It's not a noun. That means the educational system is like just like throwing concepts at the face of the child, you know? You know what it's kind of like? Imagine children are sprinting into existence in a context of freedom. And as they're sprinting, suddenly in certain incidents in their life, the momentum of the freedom of that mindset suddenly gets shackled down to another moment. Wow, wow, wow. Anyways, guys, I'm going to continue this Fuller quote. This one's incredible. Wow. He says, Buckminster Fuller says, I just invent, then wait until man comes around to needing what I've invented. Fuller says you can never learn less. You can only learn more. You know, true that. Fuller says truth is a tendency. Interesting. I find, yeah, you can say it's a verb. Fuller says nature is trying very hard to make us succeed, but nature does not depend on us. We are not the only experiment. Yes, wow. Fuller says if you are the master, be sometimes blind. If you are the servant, be sometimes deaf. Wow. This guy's blowing my mind right now with these quotes, you know. Fuller says faith is much better than belief. Belief is when someone else does the thinking. Buckminster Fuller says, I'm not a genius. I'm just a tremendous bundle of experience. It's like, what do you do with the bundle of experience you just invent, I guess? Fuller says either war is obsolete or men are. Wow. Fuller says war is the ultimate tool of politics. Rashness is the faithful, but but the unhappy parent of misfortune. Rashness is the faithful but unhappy, patient parent of misfortune. Rashness is the faithful. Yeah, I could see how being rash could require faith because it's an expression. So it's like you can't move without knowing you can move. But he says, but the unhappy parent of misfortune. Wow. That means it's an unconscious action, so it's misfortune. Wow, wow, wow. So it means when you are suddenly burst in certain moments of your life, in one manner, yes, it's an intense state, so it will bring about with itself complexity, but it's unhappy because it is unconscious. It's as if sometimes the angry man doesn't realize where he is. Sometimes he's in his past and people have to snap him out of it. This is why sometimes when you see an angry person, it's like you can imagine before their voice gets to a certain loud level, if your mind could visualize how loud their voice would be when they were angry, and you shouted, like not shouted, but said something to them like couple volumes louder than that to just stop. It's as if like somebody's about to get angry and just somebody in the moment just shouts stop, like stop, get on the ground. But what I'm saying is it's a sudden intensity. It's as if like the person's in an ordered moment, a sudden chaotic intensity comes, the order stops. Like the sort of fear that arises in sleep paralysis, you can say. And it could be the other way. The mind has freedom, And it's like somebody said, what kind of freedom does your mind have if you have freedom? And the answer is the only kind. A freedom that never needed to be free because it always was. That is it. Any thought is not you. When you associate with thought, you live a subjective life. Kind of like as I'm speaking right now, it's as if my body is physically still, but my mind is moving. The attention is navigating. But it's very fascinating because meaning is like a dance. It's one of those old school radios that it had that static handle, static electric, like it was a static electric. I'm not sure how to explain it, but it was like this kind of radio that you kind of had to turn this lever, You had to generate the power for the expression. You had to generate. You have to learn to evoke. That is the ability of the mind. Your mind, when it wakes up, it has to express some level and it has to receive. And on days where it doesn't receive and it just expresses, eventually over time it comes into a state where it becomes an expressive being. So it looks at reality from the viewpoint of a creator. I'm not bringing the idea of God into this. I'm just using the word creator, like a creator of an artwork or a design, You look from the eyes, it's like you look from freedom at its lack, and if you lack freedom, then you at least see freedom. You see where it is. You might not be there, but you can identify, you can notice it. I'm going to continue with the quote tunnel, guys. There's more. Usually I just read the first page that comes. Oh my god, there's so many. Alright, let's see how many we can get through. Buckminster Fuller says 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing this nonsense of earning a wage. Fuller says most of my advances were by mistake. You uncover what is when you get rid of what isn't. Interesting. Fuller says pollution is nothing but the resources we're not harvesting. We allow them to disperse because we've been ignorant of their value. It's kind of like recycling chaos into order. Fuller says we are called to be architects of the future, not its victims. Fuller says tension is the great integrity. He says search others for their virtue and yourself for your vices. Wow. Wow. This is an incredible quote, guys. That means when you look at people, try to see the best. When you look within, try to see what the worst is. And when I say what the worst is try to discover your limits. That means because there's a tiny percentage, 0. Whatever amount of zeros you want, 1% chance that this reality could be completely multidimensional, then the beliefs of one world are shattered with the discovery of another. Fuller says everyone is born a genius, but the process of living degeniuses them. Fuller says, let architects sing of aesthetics that bring rich clients and hordes to their knees. Just give me a home in a great circle dome where stresses and strains are at ease. Fuller says, when I'm working on a problem, I never think about beauty, but when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it is wrong. Fuller says, search other... Oh, I read that one. He says, now there is one outstandingly important fact regarding spaceship Earth, and that is no instruction book came with it. Fuller says what usually happens in the educational process is that the faculties are dulled, overloaded, stuffed, and paralyzed so that by the time most people are mature, they have lost their innate capabilities. Yup. High five, to Fuller. If there was a beer named Fuller, I would drink it, Fuller says, I look for what needs to be done. After all, that's how the universe designed itself. Man knows so much and does so little. A proverb is much matter distilled into few words. He says, my ideas have undergone a process of emergence by emergency. When they are needed badly enough, they are accepted. Wow. Wow, wow. This one's personal, wow. That means exactly you conduct yourself in observance and the witness. The presence is you're aware you're a presence before you're a personality, and there's comfort. There's a strange comfort that comes with that. You have brought your free will into the tension of the cosmos, as if there is a God there, but little did you know it's you. He says people should think things out fresh and not just accept conventional terms in the conventional way of doing things. He says parents are usually more careful to bestow knowledge on their children rather than virtue, the art of speaking well rather than doing well, but their manners should be of the greatest concern. Fuller says by 2000 politics will simply fade away. We will not see any political parties. Wow. Fuller says don't fight forces, use them. Fuller says gold and silver from the dead turn often into lead. He says God to me, it seems... Oh, I read this one. It seems is a verb, not a noun, proper or improper. Fuller says dictators never invent their own opportunities. Fuller says if humanity does not opt for integrity, we are through completely. It is absolutely touch and go. Each one of us could make the difference. Wow. Buckminster Fuller says 99% of who you are is invisible and untouchable. Yeah, because the mind's being the whole moment. How can you touch the mind? The mind is being, where the body's, in some sense, made aware of. So anyways, guys, I finished the page. I got through. But I'm definitely convinced this man is one of the greatest designers of history. Okay, guys, just to wrap this up, flawed designs and flawless intelligence. You can say one part of, like, the left side of the brain is trying to analyze everything, try to compartmentalize, just put things into structure. And the other side of your brain, the right hemisphere, is in some sense the opposite. It's as if one part of your mind is attempting to be infinite and empty at the same time. And so it's as if, you study the lines of thought and you look at the lines of thought and you realize each line is made of a dot. As if your lifetime was kind of like a line drawn on a piece of paper, all those dots that are becoming the line are every moment you've experienced. So eventually it's momentum. So life is like unconscious speed, but then it got conscious direction. So now it's like a new velocity. It's intelligence with direction. You see, because that's the only way we can say we're intelligent. If we don't have a sense of direction, if we don't have a sense of space, then we're kind of like just floating like everything else. We can't even call ourselves intelligent. If man behaves like an atom, he was never man. That means if we just repeat the cycle, that means something changed. Thank God something changed. Sometimes I thought maybe evolution was trapped, like kind of in a bubble. That means it was like something was endlessly attempting to evolve, but it couldn't. And for a long time, even though it was kind of like the attempt at the new, but the new didn't come. And it's like this loop. And I'm saying this evolutionary. This could have been like something occurring a million years ago. It could have been on such a level that it was just how bacteria was surviving an apocalypse, Strangely, the small are not affected by the big because they cannot even consider it. That means if like a star explodes out in outer space, it's like we don't really it doesn't, like, we are not concerned of our backyard that way. Yeah. Okay. Idris, welcome to the chat. Recently, I've been thinking kind of like the energy is limited. That means even if for too long we hold on to the ideas of a great civilization, imagine like children all around the world are running around whispering to one another, okay, let's make an attempt at the great civilization. Let's try to see if the potential is there, imagine. Eventually it will reach a point that if we just want to be great all the time, that will eventually become a loop. So what I'm saying is knowledge, the free will is free to use the knowledge, the data that comes to you that is being your moment, your free will can move in it, you can even start dancing. But I'm saying, like, on some level, eventually it returns to the unknown. So it's kind of like a person trying to figure out the greatest kind of mathematical perception, and eventually reverse engineering back to the number of zero and seeing the number of zero never needed to be a number. It is as if, isn't it strange? The emptiness of the page has the same value as the number zero. And so when you draw the number zero on, it's kind of like a hollow symbol. It's as if ink that shouldn't be there when you, if you were to draw the number zero, you know? And so what I'm saying is literally it's a point of value that actually has no value. It's just the image of it. So you don't know how much the mind is taking material inspiration to project its immaterial subconscious existence. Because I've wondered, there's been moments where I've wondered, okay, while I'm present now on an energetic level, could the attention be a field of intelligence? These questions, they would come to me when I would go in nature. And the best time to go to nature, I think, is midday. Not in the morning, not in the evening, just midday, you know? When the sun is commanding all life to awaken, you know? I don't know. I feel even greatness can be elusive if it's made into an ideology too much. Therefore, language shouldn't be where the attention of the whole moment should only be. So believe it or not, we're in a choice where we either have to update the language or create new languages. And when I say create new languages, that doesn't mean like just come up with new words for experiences we couldn't term, like we had no words for. I'm just saying like a language is a method of translation. And when you go find the language of your presence, that's the kind of verb that Buckminster Fuller was talking about. You find the inner river, you know? And then your mind becomes your teacher. And that's a cool moment because you realize you're the only person who, it's only your free will who is, it's like you're the only person looking through your eyes. So if there is genius hiding behind your eyes, the civilization is waiting for it. That means it's like, it's either shyness or it's extinction. So anyways, guys, if anybody has a question or interesting viewpoint they want to share, now's a good time. You know? All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and loss.